My husband, Adrian, was in the kitchen making his famous shrimp and grits when the first message came through. The scent of garlic and smoked paprika filled our apartment, a scent that used to mean safety, home, us. He was at the stove, humming a tune from our wedding, his broad back turned to me. I was at the island, pretending to scroll through my tablet, but really I was watching the silent black rectangle of his phone beside my wine glass. It lit up, not with a call, with a single, cold, blue flash of a notification. My eyes, against my will, darted to the screen. The preview text was short, brutally so. "Hey you, missed you today." My heart didn't sink. It didn't leap into my throat. It just stopped. For a second, the world went silent. The sizzle from the pan, the hum of the refrigerator, Adrian's off-key humming, it all faded into a distant white noise. That pain, the sharp, breath-stealing kind, had died a week ago when I'd opened the credit card statement and seen the charge for the boutique hotel downtown, a hotel I'd never been to. This was just confirmation. This was the spark to the fuse I'd already laid. Adrian turned, a dish towel over his shoulder, his smile so genuine it made my soul ache. "Almost ready, my love. You're gonna love this new twist." He was the picture of devotion, the perfect, doting husband in our perfect, sun-drenched loft. A lie. Every bit of it, a beautiful, painful lie. I smiled back. It felt like cracking ice on my face. "Smells amazing." His phone lit up again. This time, I didn't just see the preview. I saw the name. Ilara, the new graphic designer at his firm, the one he described as a real creative spark, a bit shy but so talented. He'd brought her name up over dinner last week, just casual office talk. My skin had crawled then. Now it felt like it was burning. The message was longer this time, the preview stretching across the lock screen. "Wish I was there tasting it instead. This place is so quiet without you. When can I see you again?" The audacity, the quiet, intimate yearning in those words sent to my husband in my home while he cooked my dinner. A cold, hard stone settled in my stomach, weighing down the nausea. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just watched his phone, a silent, dark oracle whispering secrets of my ending. He was plating the food now, artfully drizzling sauce. He hadn't heard the soft buzz. He was lost in his performance, the performance of a happy man. And that's when the third message came. "Just thinking about last Thursday. You have no idea how much I miss you, Adrian." Last Thursday, client dinner, he'd come home late, smelling of steak and some perfume that wasn't mine. He'd kissed my forehead, said the meeting ran long. I'd believed him. I'd wanted to believe him so badly. That was the message that broke the paralysis. A strange, icy calm washed over me. The pain was gone, replaced by a clarity so sharp it was almost violent. He used our anniversary as his passcode. The ultimate insult, a sentimental shield for his betrayal. I knew it by heart. He turned to bring the plates to the table. Voila! As he moved, I reached out. My fingers, steady and cold, closed around his phone. I tapped in the 6 digits. The phone unlocked. A gateway to a world of hurt. I didn't go to the messages. I didn't need to read the saga. I went straight to the reply box for Ilara. My thumbs moved quickly. decisively over the glass. "Come over. Now. She's gone for the night." I hit send. The whoosh sound was barely audible, but to me, it was the sound of a trapdoor opening. I took a screenshot, sent it to my own phone, deleted the sent message from his phone. I placed it back on the counter in the exact same spot at the exact same angle. Adrian set the beautiful plate in front of me. Voila! He looked up at me, at the man I'd built a life with for 7 years. The man who'd held my hand through my father's funeral. The man who'd planted a lilac bush on our balcony because I loved the smell. A stranger looked back at me. "It's perfect," I said. My voice was a stranger's too. The food tasted like ash. I chewed, I swallowed, I nodded as he talked about a potential promotion. All the while, a clock was ticking in my head. How long would it take her? 20 minutes? 30? She'd jump at the chance. An invitation that direct, that daring from him? She'd be in a taxi before she could second guess it. This was no longer my home. It was a stage, and the final act was about to begin. The shrimp was perfectly cooked, but all I could taste was the bitter poison of betrayal and the metallic hint of revenge. I forced down another bite of the grits, the creamy texture now cloying and thick in my mouth. Adrian was recounting a funny story about his boss, his hands animated, his laugh filling the room. It was a laugh I'd fallen in love with. Now it sounded hollow, a recording playing in an empty house. I watched his face, the crinkles around his eyes that appeared when he was genuinely amused. Was any of it genuine anymore? Or was every smile, every touch, every "I love you" just part of a long-running con? "You're quiet tonight, Chloe," he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. His skin was warm. I felt a jolt, not of affection, but of revulsion so intense I had to concentrate to keep from snatching my hand away. I let it lie there, limp, under his, a dead thing. "Just tired," I murmured, forcing a small, weary smile. "Long day at the gallery." That part was true. The gallery had been exhausting, but the weariness in my bones was from carrying the weight of his secret, from holding the shape of our life together while knowing it was already shattered inside. "You work too hard," he said, thumbing my knuckle. A loving gesture, a practiced one. "We should get away soon. Just the two of us. Maybe that cabin in the mountains we talked about." The cabin? We'd spent hours looking at photos last winter, dreaming of snow and fireplaces, another future he'd poisoned. The hypocrisy was a physical taste, bitter at the back of my tongue. "That sounds nice," I lied. My voice was soft, distant. I was already miles away, calculating. I glanced at the ornate clock on the wall. 7:43. She would be on her way. I pictured her, Ilara. Young, probably. Pretty, undoubtedly. She'd be checking her reflection, applying a fresh coat of lip gloss, her heart beating with a thrilling, illicit excitement. He wants to see me. His wife is gone. She felt chosen, special. She had no idea she was walking into a snare. "I'll clean up," Adrian said, standing and collecting the plates. "You go relax." The perfect husband. Always so helpful. I used to brag about this to my friends. He just insists on doing the dishes. Now I saw it for what it was. Part of the costume. A prop in the play of Adrian and Chloe, the perfect couple. I didn't argue. I went to the living room, but I didn't sit on our plush, cream-colored sofa. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city lights twinkling below. Our high-rise apartment had a breathtaking view. We'd saved for years to afford this slice of the sky. I'd chosen the curtains, the rug, every throw pillow. I'd built this nest, and he'd invited a viper into it. I heard the clatter of dishes, the rush of water. My mind replayed the last week in stark, painful flashes. The hotel charge, the late-night text he'd quickly dismissed as a work emergency, the new cologne, the distance in his eyes that I'd blamed on stress. The pieces had been there, jagged and ugly, but I'd refused to assemble them until now. Now, the picture was complete, and it was monstrous. A part of me, a small, wounded part, wished the doorbell wouldn't ring, wished this was all a terrible misunderstanding, that Ilara was just a clingy, misguided colleague, that my cold, calculated response had been a hysterical overreaction. That core of hope, the part that still loved the ghost of the man I'd married, was begging for a reprieve. But the larger part of me, the part that had been forged in the silent fire of betrayal, stood rigid and waiting. That part wanted to hear the bell, needed the confrontation. This festering secret had to be lanced. The pain had to be dragged into the light, no matter how much it bled. The water stopped running. Adrian came into the living room, drying his hands on a towel. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. We looked like a silhouette of romance against the glittering skyline. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he whispered into my hair. I didn't trust myself to speak. I just nodded, my body tense against his. He mistook it for contentment, sighing happily. His breath was warm on my neck. It made my skin crawl. Ding dong. The sound was polite, melodic. It echoed in the spacious, quiet apartment like a gunshot. Adrian froze. His arms tightened for a fraction of a second, then went slack. "Who on earth?" he murmured, pulling away. I turned from the window slowly. My face was a placid mask. "I'll get it." No, I'll go," he said, already taking a step toward the foyer, a flicker of something, panic, in his eyes. "I'm already up," I said, my voice calm, leaving no room for argument. I walked past him, my bare feet silent on the polished concrete floor. Every step felt momentous. The hallway to the front door seemed to stretch and lengthen. I could feel Adrian hovering behind me, a confused, anxious energy radiating from him. He didn't know, but his instincts, the instincts of a guilty man, were screaming. I reached for the heavy oak door. My hand was steady. I turned the knob, the cool metal biting into my palm, and pulled it open. There she was, Ilara. She was younger than I had imagined, mid-20s, with waves of honey-colored hair and wide, doe-like eyes. She was dressed with careful, casual seduction, a soft sweater, jeans that hugged her hips, boots. In her hands, she held a small paper bag from the fancy bakery down the street, a peace offering, a girlfriend gesture. The moment she saw me, the eager, secretive smile on her face died. It didn't just fade, it was obliterated by pure, unadulterated terror. Her eyes, a light green, widened so much I could see the white all around them. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her pale, like moonlight. She took an involuntary half-step back, her knuckles whitening around the bakery bag. She'd expected Adrian. She'd expected to fall into his arms, to whisper how much she'd missed him. She had expected a secret, thrilling night. She had not expected me. I said nothing. I simply held the door open, my body blocking the entrance, my gaze fixed on her. I let the silence stretch, let her panic bloom, and fill the space between us. It was more powerful than any shout. From behind me, Adrian's voice, strained and too loud, called out, "Chloe? Who is it?" I kept my eyes on Alara. A faint, cold smile touched my lips. "It's for you, darling. It's Alara, from your office." I turned my head slightly, just enough to see Adrian's face appear in the hallway behind me. The look on his face is one I will remember forever. It was the look of a man watching his life explode in slow motion. All the blood left his face. His jaw dropped slack. He stared at Alara, then at me, then back at Alara, his brain visibly short-circuiting, unable to process the scene. I turned back to the young woman trembling on my doorstep. "Well, don't just stand there in the hall," I said, my tone shifting to one of chilling hospitality. "Since you've come all this way, come in." Alara didn't move. She was a statue of fear, rooted to the spot on the expensive runner in our hallway. The bakery bag slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft thud. A pathetic, sad little sound. A cupcake, probably. How quaint. I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy whisper. "I thought Adrian said I wasn't home. Yes, I know." Her eyes darted past me, seeking Adrian, pleading for some kind of rescue, some explanation. But Adrian was still frozen in the shadow of the hallway, a ghost of the confident man he pretended to be. He offered her nothing, no lifeline, no defiant protection, just the stark, cowardly reality of being caught. "Please," I said, stepping aside and gesturing into the apartment. The gesture was graceful, welcoming, and utterly terrifying. That finally broke her paralysis. The threat in my polite tone was unmistakable. Moving like a sleepwalker, she bent to pick up the fallen bag, then shuffled past me over the threshold. She kept her gaze fixed on the floor, her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. I closed the door behind her. The solid click of the lock engaging was the loudest sound in the world. The apartment was now a sealed arena. "Let's go into the living room," I said, leading the way. I didn't look back, but I could hear the soft, hesitant scuff of her boots and the heavier, leaden tread of Adrian following. I sat in my usual armchair, the one by the fireplace. It was my throne in this space. I gestured for Alara to take the sofa. She perched on the very edge, back rod-rammed straight, clutching the bakery bag in her lap like a shield. Adrian hovered awkwardly, then sank into the armchair opposite mine, as far from both of us as the room allowed. He looked like a man awaiting his own execution. The silence was profound, thick enough to choke on. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. I let it stretch. Let them stew in it. Let their minds race with 1,000 terrible scenarios. My heart was a steady, cold drum in my chest. There was no fear in me now, only a focused, surgical calm. "So, Alara," I began, my voice conversational. "Adrian has told me so little about you, just that you're the brilliant new designer. He said you were shy." I tilted my head, studying her. "You don't seem shy. It takes a certain boldness to come to a married man's apartment at night, don't you think?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. A flush of ugly red mottled her neck and cheeks. It wasn't like that," she whispered. "Oh?" I raised an eyebrow. "What was it like then? Please enlighten me. Because from where I'm sitting, It looks exactly like that. Adrian finally found his voice, a dry, cracked thing. Chloe, please, this is a misunderstanding. She had a work question. She must have gotten confused. I turned my gaze to him. It was like turning the beam of a spotlight on a trapped animal. A work question. At 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night? Regarding the shrimp and grits I just ate? Or perhaps regarding the message she sent you earlier? The one that said, I miss you. I leaned forward slightly. The one that said, I miss you. The air left the room. Adrian's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Alara made a small, choked noise. You see, I continued, leaning back and crossing my legs, the picture of ease. You see, I was sitting right there when your phone lit up. I miss you. From Alara. I let the name hang in the air. Such a simple phrase, so loaded. You read my messages? Adrian's voice was a mixture of indignation and sheer terror. A humorless laugh escaped me. I didn't have to read them, Adrian. They appeared on your lock screen, an announcement, for anyone to see. I looked at Alara. Not very discreet, was it? Or did you just not care if I saw? Tears welled in her eyes, but she fought them back, her jaw tightening, a flash of defiance. Good. I wanted her to fight a little. It made it more satisfying. I'm sorry, she said again, the words barely audible. It was a mistake. Mistakes, yes. We're all making them tonight, aren't we? My mistake was believing my husband when he said he was working late. His mistake, I let my gaze drift to Adrian, who was staring at his hands, was thinking he could have two women living in two different worlds and they'd never collide. And your mistake, Alara, was thinking the reply to your message came from him. That got her. Her head snapped up, her confused, tear-filled eyes meeting mine. What? I smiled. It was not a nice smile. The message you got. Come over. Now. She's gone for the night. That was from me. The confession landed like a physical blow. Alara recoiled. Her head jerked up, his eyes wide with a new deeper horror. He assumed she'd just shown up brazenly. He hadn't realized I'd baited the hook. You, Adrian breathed, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Yes, I said softly. Me. I invited her. I wanted to meet the woman who misses my husband so much she texts him in our home. I wanted to see her face when she realized the wife was not gone. She was waiting. The game was laid bare. The predator had been the prey all along. The shock on their faces was my reward. It was a small, bitter victory, but I clung to it. Alara was crying in earnest now. Silent tears tracked through her makeup. She wasn't a cunning seductress in that moment. She was a foolish, humiliated girl who'd been played. Somewhere, buried under the ice in my heart, a tiny pang of something like pity tried to stir. I smothered it. Why? Adrian asked, his voice broken. Why would you do this? The question was so ludicrous, it took my breath away. Why? I repeated, my calm finally cracking, a sliver of the raging inferno beneath showing through. You bring another woman into our life, into our home, and you ask me why I wanted to meet her? You lie to me, you betray me, and you wonder why I didn't just serve you divorce papers with a smile? I stood up, unable to sit still with the anger surging. This isn't about why I did this, Adrian. This is about why you did. Look at her. I pointed at the weeping Alara. Was she worth it? Was any of it worth destroying us? He had no answer. He just looked from my furious face to Alara's shattered one, trapped in the hell of his own making. And I knew in that moment that this was just the beginning. The confrontation was the first act. The real drama, the real consequences were still to come, and I would be the one to direct every scene. The sound of Alara's quiet sobs was the only thing piercing the heavy silence. I stood over them both, the anger a live wire under my skin. Adrian finally lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate.
Chloe, it didn't mean anything, he pleaded, the classic cowardly line of every caught cheater. She came on to me. I was flattered. I was stupid, but I swear it's over. It was barely even started. I stared at him. This man I'd shared a bed and a life with. He was throwing his mistress under the bus to save himself. How utterly pathetic. How utterly predictable. My gaze shifted to Alara. She'd heard him. Her crying hitched, and she looked at him, a dawning horror in her wet eyes. It didn't mean anything. She came on to me. His words were knives butchering whatever fantasy she'd built about their connection. Her face crumpled further, not just from humiliation now, but from a new, deeper hurt. Betrayal upon betrayal. A cruel part of me was glad. Let her feel a fraction of the sting. "Get out," I said to her, my voice low and final. She didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled up from the sofa, fumbling for her purse, the forgotten bakery bag abandoned on the cushion. She wouldn't look at either of us. She just stumbled toward the foyer, a portrait of abject defeat. I followed her, slower, a queen escorting a trespasser from her realm. At the door, she fumbled with the lock, her hands shaking violently. "Ilara!" She froze, her back to me, shoulders tensed.
I stepped close, my voice dropping to a whisper meant only for her ears. It was cold, softer than the four, and somehow more threatening. "If you ever contact my husband again, a text, an email, a thought in his direction, I will forward every screenshot, every piece of evidence I have to everyone at your firm, to the CEO, to HR, to your parents whose address I already have from your LinkedIn profile. Your moment of weakness will follow you for the rest of your career. Do you understand?" She gave a frantic, jerky nod, a sob catching in her throat. "Good. Now, get out of my home." She fled into the hallway, the sound of her hurried footsteps fading toward the elevator. I closed the door. That same definitive click. Then I turned the deadbolt. The sound was a period at the end of a sentence. When I turned around, Adrian was standing in the living room doorway, watching me. The fear in his eyes had been joined by something else, a wary, shocked respect. He'd never seen this version of me, the version that could calmly eviscerate his mistress and lay down the law. He married the artist, the dreamer, the soft-hearted woman who cried at commercials. He didn't know the core of steel she'd been forced to forge. "Adrian," he began, taking a tentative step toward me. "Don't." I cut him off, holding up a hand. The single word was a wall. "Don't come near me, don't touch me, don't speak to me until you have something to say that isn't a lie or an excuse." I walked past him, back into the living room. I went straight to the sideboard and poured myself a glass of whiskey, neat. I didn't offer him one. I took a long, burning sip, letting the fire ground me. He lingered in the doorway, a shattered man in the ruins of his own making. "What do you want me to say?" he whispered. I turned, leaning against the sideboard, the glass cool in my hand. "I want you to tell me when it started. I want you to tell me how many times. I want you to tell me what you told her about me. I want you to tell me if you ever loved me, or if this was all just convenient." My voice was flat, analytical. I was an investigator interviewing a suspect. The love was a distant memory, an artifact under glass. He sank onto the arm of the sofa, his head in his hands. "It started 3 months ago," he mumbled into his palms. "After the firm's summer party. She was there. We talked. She was admiring. It felt good. You'd been so busy with the gallery opening, and I felt overlooked." Each word was a fresh cut. 3 months. A quarter of a year.
a secret parallel life running alongside mine. The gallery opening, my biggest professional achievement, he'd celebrated with me, brought me flowers, told me he was proud. And all the while, he was seeking admiration elsewhere. "Go on," I said, my tone devoid of encouragement. We went for drinks a week later, just colleagues. Then it was lunches. Then it just happened. A few times. Maybe 5 or 6. He looked up, his face ravaged. It was never about her, Chloe. It was about me, feeling old, stuck. It was a stupid midlife crisis thing. She means nothing. 5 or 6 times, I repeated, the number echoing in the hollow space inside me. 5 or 6 betrayals. 5 or 6 times he chose her, chose the lie over me. And what did you tell her about me? That I was cold, that I didn't understand you, that we were having problems? He winced, guilty. I might have said we were in a rough patch, that you were distant. I laughed then, a short, sharp, bitter sound. Of course, the cheater's handbook. Blame the wife. Make yourself the victim so your mistress can feel like a savior. I took another sip of whiskey. I set my glass down with a precise click. Get out. He blinked, confused. What? You heard me. Get out of this apartment tonight. I don't care where you go. A hotel, her place, the office. I don't want you here. Chloe, this is my home too, he protested, a spark of his old self flashing, entitled, indignant. Not anymore, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. You polluted it. You brought your filth into it. So get out. Take a bag, now, or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. And I will show them the screenshots of you inviting your mistress over while your wife was home. See how that plays. The fight drained out of him. He saw the resolve in my eyes, the absolute lack of mercy. He was defeated. Without another word, he shuffled toward our bedroom. I didn't follow him. I listened to the sounds of drawers opening and closing, a zipper, the clatter of hangers. He emerged 10 minutes later with a duffel bag, looking like a ghost. He paused at the front door, looking back at me. There were tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Chloe. I never meant to hurt you. The apology was too little, years too late. It was just noise. The key, I said, holding out my hand. He fumbled in his pocket and placed the fob to our building and the key to our door in my palm. His fingers brushed mine. I didn't flinch. I felt nothing. He opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. He turned. One last, pleading look. I closed the door in his face. I turned the deadbolt again, then the chain. And then finally, alone, in the silence of the apartment we'd built together, I slid down the back of the door until I was sitting on the floor. I wrapped my arms around my knees, buried my face in them, and let the silent, shuddering sobs finally come. The performance was over. The director was alone in the empty theater, and the pain was a tsunami breaking over me at last. I don't know how long I sat there on the cold floor, my body racked with silent tremors. The sobs weren't loud. They were dry, wrenching things that felt like they were tearing me apart from the inside. All the calm, all the control I'd wielded like a weapon had evaporated, leaving me a raw, exposed nerve. The apartment, once my sanctuary, felt alien and hostile. Every object held a memory now tainted by his lie. The rug we'd picked out together in Marrakesh. The stupid, ugly vase his mother gave us that I secretly hated but kept because it made him happy. The books on the shelf. His thrillers mixed with my art histories. A life intertwined. Now just a mess to be sorted, divided, discarded.
The tears subsided, leaving me hollowed out and exhausted. A profound numbness settled in. I pushed myself up, my legs stiff. I walked through the rooms, turning off lights. In the kitchen, the remains of his perfect shrimp and grits sat congealing in the pan. I dumped it all, pan and all, into the trash. The clatter was satisfying, a small, violent act of erasure. I couldn't sleep in our bed. The very thought made my skin crawl. I went to the guest room, a sterile, rarely used space, and lay down on top of the duvet, still in my clothes. I stared at the ceiling, my mind a whirring, chaotic blank. The shock was wearing off, and in its place crept a cold, calculating practicality. What now? The question was immense. Divorce, obviously. But it wasn't just an emotional severance. It was a financial and legal unraveling of a 7-year partnership. The apartment, the investments, the shared accounts, the car. The life we'd built was a corporation, and it was dissolving. And then there was the other matter, revenge. The confrontation had been personal, visceral, but it wasn't enough. Adrian had betrayed more than just my heart. He'd betrayed my trust, my partnership, my future. He'd risked my financial security and my health for a cheap thrill. He didn't get to just walk into a hotel room and start over. He needed to feel consequences that reached beyond my tears. A plan, vague but hardening, began to form in the numb space where my heart used to be. It wasn't about violence or screaming matches. It was about precision. It was about targeting what he valued most, after his own comfort, his reputation, and his career. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through the blinds, I got up. I felt brittle, but clear-headed. I made coffee in the silent kitchen, the familiar routine a small anchor. Then I went to my home office, a cozy nook filled with art books and my drafting table. I sat at my computer and got to work. First, I secured everything. I changed all my passwords, email, banking, social media. I called our bank and had his name removed from my personal savings account, an account he technically shouldn't have had access to, but whose details he knew. I transferred half of our joint checking account, the one for household bills, into my new secure account. It wasn't stealing, it was securing my share before he could try to empty it in a panic. Then I began to collect. I logged into our shared cloud storage where he stupidly backed up his phone. I found the photos, not explicit, but damning. Selfies of them at a bar, her head on his shoulder, a picture of her feet propped up on what was unmistakably the dashboard of his car. I downloaded them all. I combed through our credit card statements from the last 3 months, highlighting every suspicious charge. Dinners for 2 at intimate restaurants, the boutique hotel, even a charge for a jewelry store. I compiled them into a spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and locations. I found the email confirmations for the hotel. I found a receipt in his jacket pocket yesterday for a wine bar, paid for with his corporate card. A business meeting, he'd said. The timestamp was for a Thursday night at 9 p.m. I photographed it. Piece by piece, I built a dossier. It was clinical, methodical. With each piece of evidence, the pain receded a little more, replaced by a focused, almost artistic drive. I was curating an exhibition of his betrayal. By mid-morning, I was done. I had a folder on my desktop labeled A. Inside were PDFs, image files, spreadsheets. It was a story, told in receipts and pixels, of how Adrian Collins had dismantled his own life. My phone buzzed. It was him, a text. "Chloe, please, we need to talk. I'm at the Marriott downtown. I'm devastated. I'll do anything." I didn't reply.
I saved the screenshot of his text to the folder. More evidence of his post-discovery panic, his attempts to manipulate. The next buzz was a call. I let it go to voicemail. He called again and again. On the fourth call, I picked up. "Stop calling me," I said, my voice flat. "Chloe, thank God, listen to me." "No, you listen. Do not come to the apartment. Do not call me again today. Our next communication will be through my lawyer. You'll be hearing from her soon." "Lawyer? Chloe, no. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. I'll quit my job. You'll do what you're told. And right now, you're told to wait. Goodbye, Adrian." I hung up and immediately blocked his number. Then I scrolled through my contacts and found the one I needed. Simone Russo. Simone wasn't just my best friend since college. She was a partner at one of the city's most formidable family law firms. She specialized in high net worth, messy divorces. She was brilliant, ruthless when she needed to be, and fiercely loyal. I took a deep breath and dialed. She answered on the second ring. "Simone, I was just thinking about you. How's the new series coming?" "Simone," and my voice broke on her name. All the controlled calm shattered. "I need you. Adrian, he's been having an affair. I need a lawyer." There was a beat of stunned silence on the other end. Then Simone's voice shifted, all business, laced with a protective fury I knew was for me. "Where are you?" "Home." "Is he there?" "No. I threw him out last night." "Good girl. Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. I'm canceling my morning and I'll be there in 20 minutes. But the kettle on. We're going to war." The line went dead. I sat there, holding the phone, the first real feeling of something like hope, or maybe just a grim solidarity, warming the edges of the cold void inside me. I wasn't alone, and with Simone in my corner, Adrian had no idea what was coming for him. Simone arrived in 18 minutes flat, looking like vengeance in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. She didn't hug me immediately. Her sharp, dark eyes scanned my face, the apartment, assessing the damage like a field general. "Okay," she said, placing her leather briefcase on the kitchen island with a definitive thump. "Talk. From the beginning. Leave nothing out." And so I did. Over the tea that grew cold in our cups, I told her everything. The initial suspicion, the credit card charge, the messages, my lethal reply, Ilara's terrified face at the door, the confrontation, his pathetic confession, throwing him out. I showed her the A folder on my computer. I was matter-of-fact, dispassionate, until I got to the part about the hotel receipt. Then my voice cracked. Simone listened without interruption, her expression growing grimmer and grimmer. When I finished, she let out a long, slow breath. "What a piece of work," she muttered, shaking her head. Then she looked at me, her gaze softening for just a moment. "I am so sorry, Chloe. You didn't deserve this. No one does."
The kindness almost undid me. I bit the inside of my cheek hard, forcing the tears back. Now was not the time. "But," Simone continued, the softness vanishing, replaced by a razor-sharp focus, "you handled it like a goddamn queen. The invitation, the confrontation, flawless psychological warfare. He's off balance. He's panicking. That's exactly where we want him." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a legal pad and a pen. "Our goals. 1. A divorce on the most favorable terms possible for you. 2. Financial protection. 3. She looked up, a glint in her eye. Appropriate consequences for his actions, particularly the misuse of marital assets and potential misuse of corporate funds." "Appropriate consequences?" I repeated. "You mean..."
I mean, we don't just take him to divorce court, Simone said, her voice low and intent. We make sure his professional life reflects the gravity of his personal choices. That hotel receipt paid with a joint card, that's marital asset dissipation. That wine bar charge on his corporate card for a business dinner with his mistress, that's fraud. At the very least, it's a gross violation of company ethics policy. A cold thrill shot through me. This was beyond the emotional revenge I'd fantasized about. This was structural. This was dismantling the pillars of the life he'd built on a foundation of lies. Won't that look vindictive? I asked, a whisper of my old self, the conflict avoider, surfacing. Simone fixed me with a look. Chloe, he didn't just cheat. He financed his affair with your shared money. He potentially committed fraud at his job. We're not being vindictive. We're ensuring accountability. And strategically, it gives us immense leverage. He'll be desperate to keep this from his employers. We can use that to negotiate a far better settlement for you. She was right. This wasn't about spite. It was about justice and survival. What do we do first? First, we secure your immediate finances. We've already done some of that. Good. Next, we file for legal separation immediately. That locks in the date of separation for asset division purposes. Everything after this date, his income is his alone. Then we send a preservation letter to his firm. A what? A formal letter from your counsel, me, to the head of HR and the managing partner. It states that due to ongoing matrimonial litigation, all records pertaining to Adrian Collins, including expense reports, corporate card statements, and communications, must be preserved. We cite potential issues with misuse of company funds. My eyes widened. You're going to tell his job before we even file for divorce? We're not accusing him of anything in the letter, Simone explained calmly. We're simply putting them on notice that his financial records are relevant to a legal proceeding. It's a standard legal tactic. But the effect, a small grim smile touched her lips, the effect is that HR will immediately launch a quiet internal audit. They'll find the wine bar, they'll find any other client dinners that look suspicious. The spotlight turns on him at work. The pressure multiplies. The elegance of it was brutal. It wasn't a screaming match in the office lobby. It was a single, formal piece of paper that would unleash a silent, bureaucratic tsunami in his life. He'll freak out, I said quietly. Good, Simone replied, not unkindly. He should. No, you need to decide what you want. The apartment? I looked around. The beautiful, sun-filled tomb. No, I can't stay here. I want my share of the equity. Clean break. Smart. We'll push for a forced sale if he can't buy you out. Alimony? You have your own income from the gallery, but there's a disparity. I don't want his money long-term, I said, the words surprising me with their certainty. I want what's fair for the assets we built together. Then I want him gone. Simone nodded, making notes. We can structure a lump sum settlement. Use the threat of exposing the corporate card issue to get him to agree to a favorable number. He'll want this to go away quietly. For the next 2 hours, we plotted. Simone was a strategist, mapping out moves and countermoves. She told me what to expect. The bluster, the pleading, the attempts at guilt, the possible smear campaign from him or his family. She armed me with responses. This is not a negotiation about our marriage. This is a negotiation about the dissolution of our partnership. She told me to keep a journal of any contact he attempted, to save every voicemail, every text. By the time she left, I was exhausted but energized. The numbness was gone, replaced by a sense of grim purpose. I was no longer a victim. I was a party to a legal action. I had a general and a battle plan. My phone, with Adrian still blocked, was silent. But I knew the storm was gathering. Simone's letter would go out tomorrow. The first domino would fall. I spent the rest of the day packing a suitcase. I wasn't leaving my home. He was. But I needed space. I booked a week at a quiet, anonymous boutique hotel across town. I called the gallery and told them I had a family emergency and would be working remotely for a few days. I watered my plants, I unplugged his PlayStation, and put it in a closet. As I zipped up my suitcase, I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror. I looked pale with shadows under my eyes, but my gaze was steady. The woman looking back was someone I was just getting to know. She was harder. She was angrier. She was not to be trifled with. I was about to walk out the door when my personal email pinged on my laptop. It was a notification from a shared calendar I'd forgotten about. It was a reminder, set by Adrian months ago. Annual review and bonus discussion, 10 a.m. It was for tomorrow, his big, important meeting where he'd find out about his promotion, his year-end bonus, the meeting he'd been working toward all year. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. Simone's preservation letter would hit HR first thing in the morning. Perfect timing. The boutique hotel room was a study in beige tranquility. It smelled of lemongrass and clean linen. I dropped my suitcase by the door and stood in the center of the room, the silence a stark contrast to the echoing emptiness of my apartment. Here, there were no memories, no ghosts, just neutral space. I ordered room service, a simple salad, a glass of white wine, and ate it at the small desk, scrolling through the news on my tablet without absorbing a word. My mind was miles away, in the sleek high-rise that housed Sterling and Price, architectural design. It was 9:55 a.m. Adrian would be in his office, or perhaps heading to the conference room on the 30th floor. He'd be nervous, but excited. He'd have rehearsed his talking points, polished his shoes. He'd be thinking about the bonus number, about the new title, about how he'd tell me over a celebratory dinner. A dinner that would now never happen. At 10:05 a.m., my email chimed. It was Simone. Preservation letters sent via certified courier to S&P HR and managing partner. Attention, Margaret Cho. Received and signed for at 9:48 p.m. The clock is ticking.
I felt a jolt of adrenaline, cold and sharp. It was done. The first salvo had been fired. I pictured the HR director, Margaret Cho, opening the crisp legal envelope, her brow furrowing as she read the formal, threatening language. Potential issues pertaining to misuse of company funds. All records must be preserved. Ongoing matrimonial litigation. She wouldn't panic, but she would act. Protocol was protocol. I spent the morning trying to work on sketches for the gallery, but my lines were shaky, my ideas non-existent. I was just waiting. At 11:30, my hotel phone rang, making me jump. It was the front desk. "Miss Thorne, there's a gentleman here asking for you, a Mr. Collins. He's quite insistent." He'd found me. Of course he had. He'd probably called the gallery, guilt-tripped my assistant, or maybe he'd just driven to every nice hotel in the Midtown area. The man was nothing if not persistent when he wanted something. My first instinct was to say I'm not here, but hiding felt weak. He didn't get to chase me out of my own life, and part of me wanted to see the fallout on his face. "Send him up," I said, my voice calm. 5 minutes later, a firm knock rattled the hotel room door. I looked through the peephole. Adrian stood there, but he was a wreck. His shirt was rumpled, his tie askew, his eyes were bloodshot, wild. The confident architect was gone, replaced by a cornered animal. I unchained the door and opened it, but didn't step back. I blocked the entrance. "What are you doing here, Adrian? I told you to communicate through my lawyer." "They suspended me," he blurted, his voice ragged.
He didn't even try to push past me, he just stood there, trembling. HR called me into a conference room at 10:15. Margaret Cho had your lawyer's letter. They had my corporate card statements printed out. They asked me about the wine bar, about the hotel, about personal expenses masquerading as client entertainment. His words tumbled out in a frantic, breathless rush. He was sweating, despite the hotel's cool air. I said nothing. I just watched him unravel. They suspended me pending a full audit. No bonus discussion, no review. Security escorted me to my desk to get my things and then out of the building. In front of everyone, Chloe. My team saw me being walked out like a criminal. A dark, fierce satisfaction bloomed in my chest. It was ugly, but it was real. He cared so much about appearances, about his polished image. Now it was shattered. "Did you do this?" he demanded, his fear curdling into anger. "Did you tell them? How could you? You're trying to destroy me." Finally, I spoke. My voice was quiet, lethally calm. "I didn't tell them anything, Adrian. My lawyer sent a standard legal notice to preserve records because your financial conduct is relevant to our divorce. You are the one who put personal charges on a company card. You are the one who created the evidence. You destroyed yourself. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see the mess." He stared at me, his chest heaving. The truth of my words hit him, and the anger deflated, leaving pure terror. "You have to call them," he begged, his voice breaking. "You have to tell your lawyer to recant, to say it was a mistake. I'll lose my job. I'll never work in this city again. I'll give you anything you want in the divorce. Just please, make this go away." He was on his knees now, not physically, but in every other way, pleading, bargaining, desperate. I felt nothing. No pity, no schadenfreude, just a cold, clean emptiness. No. The single word hung between us. His face crumpled. "Chloe, I'm your husband. We had a life together. How can you be so cold?" That finally sparked something in me, a flash of the old searing pain. I was never cold, Adrian. You were. You were cold when you kissed me goodbye and went to meet her. You were cold when you lied to my face. You were cold when you used our money to pay for your affair. Don't you dare accuse me of being cold now that you're facing the consequences of your own actions. I took a step back, my hand on the door. Get out, and do not come to my hotel again. The next time you try to contact me directly, I will file a restraining order. Do you understand? He looked at me, truly looked at me, and saw a stranger. The woman he'd married was gone. In her place was someone with granite in her spine and ice in her veins. He had created her. He stumbled back into the hallway without another word. I closed the door, locked it, and slid the chain back into place. I leaned against it, listening to his retreating footsteps. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from power. For the first time since I saw that message, I felt like I was steering the ship, not being tossed by the storm. Simone called an hour later. "Well?" she said, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. "That was faster than even I expected. HR at Sterling and Price are notoriously efficient. He's out." I told her. She came to see me. "She's panicking." Good. Let him panic. Panicked people make bad decisions, and we want him to make bad decisions. His next move will likely be to hire a lawyer, probably some expensive shark who will advise him to go on the offensive. They might try to dig up dirt on you, claim you were neglectful, mentally unstable, anything to gain leverage. The idea was so absurd it almost made me laugh. What dirt? I pay my taxes, I run a successful small business, I volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends. I'm boringly respectable. Exactly, which is why their only play will be to attack the settlement, to drag things out hoping you'll get tired and settle for less. We won't let that happen. Our next move? We filed a formal petition for divorce tomorrow. We hit him with the full financial demands up front. Equitable division of all assets, your share of the apartment equity as a lump sum, contribution to your legal fees due to his dissipation of marital assets. Will a judge really make him pay my legal fees? Given the evidence of him using marital funds for an affair? Absolutely. It's a penalty for bad behavior. Now, get some rest. The paperwork is coming. This is where the real grind begins. I hung up and looked out the hotel window at the city. Somewhere out there, Adrian was in a bar or a cheap motel room, his world in ashes. Alara was probably deleting her social media, terrified her name would leak. And I was here, in a quiet room, plotting the final, legal dismantling of the life we'd shared. The storm was no longer breaking over me. I was the storm.
The following week passed in a strange liminal space. I moved out of the hotel and into a temporary furnished apartment Simone's firm kept for clients in transition. It was bland, but functional. I went to the gallery, losing myself in the quiet, tangible world of canvas and color. My staff knew something was wrong, but I offered no explanations, just a quiet, steely focus on work. The divorce papers were served to Adrian at the Marriott. Simone called to tell me his lawyer had made contact, a man named Douglas Wright, known for being aggressively theatrical. "He'll bluster," Simone warned. "He'll threaten to fight for the apartment, for spousal support from you, the whole 9 yards. It's a tactic. Ignore it." Adrian, true to form, tried the emotional route again. He sent a long, rambling email to my personal account, bypassing Simone. It was a masterpiece of manipulation, full of self-pity and vague promises of change. "I've started therapy. I see now what I threw away. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Can't we just talk without the lawyers, for old time's sake?" I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Simone. She said, "Add it to the file. Evidence of attempted coercion and disregard for legal process." The only communication I had directly was with the realtor Simone recommended. We met at the apartment to stage it for sale. Walking through those rooms with a stranger, discussing neutralizing the decor and maximizing curb appeal was surreal. It was like discussing the autopsy of a loved one. This was no longer my home. It was product 4B in a desirable zip code. As we stood in the master bedroom, the realtor, a cheerful woman named Bev, said we should probably pack up the more personal items, family photos, keepsakes. Buyers need to imagine their own life here. That task fell to me. I returned alone the next day with a stack of cardboard boxes. I started in the living room, taking down the framed photos from our travels. Us laughing in Rome, silhouetted against a Santorini sunset, bundled up on a Scottish hillside. In every picture, my smile looked naive, trusting. I packed them away, face down. I found the memory box on the top shelf of our closet. A silly thing, a wooden crate where we'd tossed mementos. Ticket stubs from our first movie, a dried corsage from a friend's wedding, a love note he'd left on my windshield once. I opened it. On top was a sonogram photo. It wasn't mine. We'd never been pregnant. My blood ran cold. I picked it up with trembling fingers. It was dated from 4 months ago. The name on the sticker in the corner was blurry, but I could make out Ilara J. and a date of birth estimate. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the floor, the grainy black and white image swimming before my eyes. A baby. She was pregnant. Or had been. The betrayal, which I thought had reached its deepest point, found a new bottom.
It wasn't just an affair, it was a potential child, a whole other human being, a lifetime of connection he would have with her while he lied to me. The nausea was immediate and overwhelming. I don't know how long I sat there. The shock was a physical blow, leaving me breathless. When I could move, I took a picture of the sonogram with my phone. Then I placed it carefully back in the box. I didn't throw it away. It was evidence. Of what, I wasn't sure yet. I called Simone from the floor of the closet, my voice eerily calm. I found something new. I texted her the photo. She called back within minutes. Jesus, Chloe, are you okay? No. The word was simple, true. What does this mean? It means, Simone said, her voice grim, that this is no longer just about adultery and dissipated assets. This is about potential future support obligations that could affect the marital estate. If there's a child, Adrian's financial responsibilities are vastly different. We need to know. How? We subpoena her medical records if we have to. But first, we force the issue. I'll have a formal interrogatory drawn up, a set of written questions he has to answer under oath. One of them will be, are you the biological father of any child conceived during the marriage, outside the marriage? He has to answer. If he lies, it's perjury. The legal machinery was grinding on, colder and more brutal than I could have imagined. It was uncovering layers of deceit I hadn't dared to contemplate. What if she's had it or lost it? I asked, my voice small. Then it's still relevant to establishing the depth and nature of the affair. It shows planning, emotional entanglement far beyond a fling. It strengthens our case for punitive settlement. She paused. Chloe, this is huge. And it's horrible. I'm so sorry. I ended the call and finished packing the memory box. The sonogram buried inside like a toxic secret. I taped the box shut and labeled it A. Personal, Do Not Open. That night, in my sterile temporary apartment, I finally broke. The sonogram image was burned into my mind. I thought of Ilara, young and scared, maybe excited. I thought of Adrian, knowing about this, hiding it, still coming home to me, still playing husband. The monstrous scale of his deception was too big to hold. I cried until I was empty, until there were no tears left, just a hollow, aching void. The next morning, my eyes were swollen, but my resolve had hardened into something diamond-hard and unbreakable. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had risked creating an entire life based on a lie that involved me. Any lingering softness, any microscopic fragment of me that might have considered reconciliation under some impossible circumstance evaporated. Simone's interrogatories were filed. The legal net was tightening, and I realized I didn't just want my fair share anymore. I wanted him to pay. For everything. A few days later, as I was leaving the gallery, I saw her, Ilara. She was sitting on a bench in the small plaza across the street, just staring into space. She looked gaunt, older. The youthful glow was gone. She was alone. Our eyes met across the distance. There was no anger in her gaze now, just a profound, weary sadness and a flicker of fear. She looked away quickly, stood up, and hurried down the street, disappearing into the crowd. Seeing her didn't bring me satisfaction. It just made the whole tragedy feel more real, more sprawling. She was a casualty too, in his war of selfishness, but she was a willing casualty. I had not signed up for this. She had.
I walked to my car, the weight of it all pressing down on me. But under the weight was that core of steel. I had started this journey in shock, then moved to anger, then to calculation. Now I had arrived at a kind of grim, unwavering determination. This would end, and I would walk away with what I was owed and my freedom intact, no matter what.
The response to Simone's interrogatories came not from Adrian's lawyer, but from Adrian himself. Another email, sent late on a Friday night. It reeked of desperation and cheap scotch. Chloe, I got the papers, the questions. You want to know about a child? There is no child. There was a scare, a mistake. It was dealt with. It's over. She's gone. I never loved her. It was all a terrible, stupid mistake. Please, you have to stop this. Douglas says you're asking for the moon. The apartment sale won't cover what you want. My suspension is now a termination. They found more charges. They're talking about pursuing legal action for fraud. I have nothing left. I'm drowning. Can't you find it in your heart to just let me go? Take what's fair and let me try to put my life back together? I'm begging you. Adrian. I read it 3 times. The confession about the scare was like a punch to the gut, even though I'd suspected. It was dealt with. The cold, clinical phrase made my skin crawl. Was that his decision? Hers? A shared, panicked choice? I didn't want to know. But the fact that it had even been a possibility, a thread of a future that had been snipped, left me feeling oddly, terribly bereft. For the ghost of that might have been child, for my own lost motherhood, which we'd postponed for the right time, a time he'd spent fathering a potential child with someone else. His plea for mercy was pathetic. Let me go? He was the one who had left, long before he'd walked out the door. I forwarded it to Simone with a single note. He's cracking. She called immediately. He's communicating directly again, which is stupid for him and great for us. He's admitted to the pregnancy scare in writing. That's gold. And he's confirmed the job loss and potential fraud case. His position is weaker than we thought. What do? We press our advantage. We don't lower our demands. In fact, we increase them slightly. We add a line about him being solely responsible for any tax liabilities or legal fees stemming from his corporate fraud investigation, since those actions occurred during the marriage and could implicate marital assets. Can we do that? We can ask. The worst he can say is no. But he won't. He's terrified. He needs this to be over so he can focus on not going to jail. We have him by the throat. It's time to squeeze. I felt a tremor of something. Not pity, but a kind of surreal disbelief. This was the man I'd promised to love forever. Now we were in a brutal financial negotiation, with his professional ruin and possible criminal liability as my leverage. The normalcy of our past life felt like a dream. I said, do it. My voice steady. The following week, the negotiation played out through the lawyers like a tense, silent chess game. Douglas Wright blustered about extortion and unconscionable demands. Simone coolly cited case law regarding dissipation of assets and fiduciary duty during marriage. She attached the email where Adrian admitted to the affair-related scare. She hinted broadly at the sonogram photo we had. The counteroffers flew back and forth. The numbers shifted, decimals moving like tectonic plates. My lump sum demand, the percentage of his soon-to-be non-existent 401k, the division of the few stocks we owned. Through it all, I was numb. I signed where Simone told me to sign. I agreed to terms that were a spectacular victory by any objective measure.
I was set to walk away with nearly 70% of our net assets, all my legal fees covered, and a clean release from any liability for his mess at Sterling and Price. The final hurdle was the apartment. An offer came in, surprisingly strong. The sale would cover the mortgage and leave a healthy chunk of equity. My share, as outlined in the settlement, would be wired to me upon closing. The day of the closing arrived. It was held in a title company's conference room. Adrian and I had to be there to sign the final papers, transferring the deed to the new owners. Simone came with me. Adrian was there with Douglas Wright. He looked like hell. Thinner, paler, wearing a suit that seemed too big. He wouldn't meet my eyes. We sat on opposite sides of the long table. The title agent droned on about covenants and warranties. We signed a mountain of documents. Every time I put my pen to paper, I was signing away a piece of my past. Our first home. The place where we dreamed our dreams. At one point, when we were both signing the same oversized transfer document, our hands were close on the table. I saw his wedding band still on his finger. I'd taken mine off weeks ago. He saw me looking at it, and a flush of shame crept up his neck. He quickly shifted his hand. When it was finally over, the title agent gathered the papers. "Congratulations," he said cheerfully, to no one in particular. Adrian stood up abruptly, mumbled something to his lawyer, and hurried out of the room without a backglance. Douglas Wright gave Simone a curt nod and followed. I stayed seated for a moment, letting the reality settle. It was done. The last tangible thread was cut. "You okay?" Simone asked, putting a hand on my shoulder. I will be. And, for the first time, I believed it. We walked out into the bright afternoon. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my bank. The first installment of the settlement, a sizable 6-figure sum, had been deposited. The money felt abstract. It wasn't happiness. It was freedom. It was options. It was a fresh start, bought at a terrible price, but mine nonetheless. "Let's get a drink," Simone said, a very expensive one to new beginnings. As we walked to a nearby bar, I realized I felt lighter. The anger was still there, a low ember, but it was no longer consuming me. The pain was a scar, tender but closed. The overwhelming feeling was of sheer, unadulterated relief. The war was over. I had won by every measurable metric. But as I sipped my martini, I knew the real victory wasn't in the bank statement or the signed papers. The real victory was that I was still standing. I had faced the abyss he created, and I hadn't fallen in. I'd built a bridge out of legal filings and cold resolve, and I'd walked across it. I was on the other side now. And the view, while uncertain, was finally my own. The first few weeks of true freedom were disorienting. The constant low-grade anxiety of legal battles was gone, replaced by a vast, empty quiet. I used some of the settlement money as a down payment on a small, bright condo in a neighborhood I'd always loved but could never afford with Adrian. It was a pre-war building with character, high ceilings, and a view of a tree-lined street, not a glittering skyline. It felt like me. Not us. Me.
I hired a decorator, not to create a showplace, but to help me build a sanctuary. We chose warm, earthy colors, deep greens, warm taupes, pops of burnt orange. I filled it with art from emerging artists I'd met through the gallery, and with plants, lots of them. It was alive, growing, imperfect. Work became my anchor. I threw myself into curating a new exhibition at the gallery, a collection focused on renewal. It was cathartic, if a little on the nose. I found a strange, fierce joy in supporting other artists telling stories of survival and rebirth. I heard snippets about Adrian through the city's gossip vine, which Simone kept unofficially tapped into. The fraud case at Sterling and Price had been settled internally. He'd had to repay the misused funds and was effectively blacklisted. He'd moved to a smaller, less prestigious firm in a suburb, a significant step down. The word was he was just going through the motions. Alara had left the city entirely, moved back to her hometown, according to a mutual acquaintance on LinkedIn. I hoped for her sake she was getting the help she needed. I felt no hatred for her anymore, just a distant, sad pity. She'd been a pawn in his game too, and had paid a steep price. One rainy Thursday afternoon, I was in the gallery's back office, finalizing the layout for the renewal show. My assistant, Leo, poked his head in. "Chloe, there's a woman here to see you. Says it's personal. A Miss Russo?" Simone. She never just dropped by the gallery. A trickle of unease went through me. "Send her back." Simone appeared a moment later, not in her usual power suit, but in chic, dark jeans and a leather jacket. She looked serious, but not alarmed. She held a manila envelope. "Hey," I said, standing up. "This is a surprise. Everything okay?" "Everything's fine," she said, closing the office door behind her. "More than fine, actually. I have something for you. Something that came to my office. I debated whether to give it to you, but I think you should have it." She placed the envelope on my desk. It was light, no markings. I slid out the contents. It was a single, high-quality photographic print, not a sonogram. It was a picture of a newborn baby, swaddled in a hospital blanket, tiny and perfect. A little girl, according to the pink cap. She had a shock of dark hair and her eyes were squeezed shut. She was beautiful. My breath caught. Attached to the back of the print with a paperclip was a small, plain note card. In neat, feminine handwriting, it read, "Her name is Isla. She was born 3 weeks ago, healthy. I'm telling you because you deserved to know the whole truth. I'm sorry for my part in all of it. I'm keeping her, and we're going to be okay. Please don't hate her. E." I stared at the photo, my mind reeling. The scare had been a child, a living, breathing little girl. Adrian's daughter. He had a daughter. The emotions came in a confusing, crashing wave. Shock, anger, at him, for his lie of omission even in his confession. A strange, protective ache for this innocent baby, and a profound, weary sadness for the labyrinth of lies that had brought her into the world. "She had the baby," I whispered, my eyes glued to the tiny face. "It would seem so," Simone said softly. "The note came to my office, addressed to you, care of me. Smart of her to send it to you, care of me. She probably didn't want to trigger you by sending it to your home." "Why?" I looked up at Simone, tears blurring my vision. "Why send this to me? To hurt me more?" "I don't think so," Simone said, her voice gentle. "Look at the note. You deserved to know the whole truth. I think it's an apology and a warning. She's telling you the affair produced a permanent consequence, that Adrian is a father, that he has a financial responsibility for the next 18 years that will affect his ability to, I don't know, come after you later. Or maybe she just thought, after everything, you had a right to know." I looked back at Isla's perfect sleeping face. She was entirely blameless. She was also a tangible, lifelong proof of my husband's betrayal, a living ghost who would haunt his future and, by extension, always be a part of my story. "Does he know?" I asked, my voice thick. "I have no idea. The note isn't clear. She may have told him. She may not have. Given his email about a scare being dealt with, I'd guess she didn't tell him she was keeping it. She may have decided on her own." The complexity of it was staggering. Alara, alone making this choice. Adrian, oblivious, his life already in ruins. And this baby, a fresh start born from such a tainted beginning. "What do I do with this?" I asked, holding the photo. "Whatever you need to. You can burn it, you can keep it, you can send it to him with a nasty note. But I'll tell you what you should do. As your friend and your lawyer, nothing. The divorce is final.
The settlement is done and includes protections for you. His child support obligations to her are separate from you. This changes nothing legally for you. It only changes the story." She was right. It was just information. Painful, life-altering information, but it had no power over my future unless I gave it power. I placed the photo and note back in the envelope. My hands were steady. "I'll keep it," I said, not to look at, but to acknowledge. It happened. This is part of the truth. She nodded, approving. "That's incredibly strong of you, Chloe." "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "I feel tired and sad. For that baby, for the mess she's been born into. But not for him," Simone stated. I thought about it. Did I feel anything for Adrian anymore? "No," I said finally. "Not for him. He made his choices. He gets to live with them. All of them." Simone stayed for a while and we talked about lighter things. The new exhibition, her latest dating disaster. After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, the unopened envelope on my desk. I didn't look at the photo again. I put the envelope in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, behind folders of old invoices. I would know it was there. A piece of the truth. Archived. Not dominating my present, but not erased either. That night, in my new condo, surrounded by my new things, I felt a shift. The last secret had been revealed, the final shocking twist in the saga. There were no more surprises lurking in the dark. The story was complete. It was a terrible story in many ways, but it was mine, and it was over. Now I could finally begin writing the next one.
The renewal exhibition opened to a soft, appreciative crowd. The gallery was alive with the murmur of conversation, the clink of wine glasses, and the powerful, silent language of art. I moved through the room in a simple black dress, greeting patrons, talking to the artists. I felt a sense of deep, quiet pride. This was my world, rebuilt from the ground up. Midway through the evening, Leo found me, looking slightly puzzled. "Chloe, there's a gentleman asking for you. He's not on the guest list. Says he's an old friend's." I followed Leo's glance to the entrance. A man stood there, holding a glass of wine, looking slightly out of place amidst the artsy crowd. He was tall, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. It took me a second to place him. David. David Chen. We'd been friends in graduate school, both studying art history. He'd had a hopeless crush on me back then, which I gently deflected because I was with Adrian. We'd lost touch over the years. I'd heard he'd become a successful conservator at the City Museum. A genuine smile spread across my face for the first time that night that wasn't professional. I excused myself and walked over. "David, oh my God, what are you doing here?" He grinned, looking relieved I remembered him. "I saw the listing for the show in the paper. Renewal, curated by Chloe Thorne. I had to come see. And to see you. You look amazing." There was no flirtation in his tone, just warm, honest admiration. And something else, a knowledge in his eyes. He'd heard. The divorce of a semi-prominent architect and a gallery owner wasn't front-page news, but in certain circles, it had rippled. "Thank you," I said, feeling a real blush creep up my neck. "It's so good to see you. How have you been?" We fell into easy conversation, catching up on the last decade. He talked about his work restoring Renaissance frescoes. I talked about the gallery. He was divorced too, amicably, a few years back. No kids. He asked thoughtful questions about the exhibition, his eyes truly seeing the art, not just using it as background noise. It was nice. It was normal. A conversation with a kind, interesting man who looked at me like I was a person, not a victim or an adversary or a prize. We talked until the crowd began to thin. He offered to walk me to my car. As we stood on the sidewalk under the glow of a street lamp, he said, "I know this might be too soon or completely inappropriate, but would you like to have coffee sometime? Just as old friends, no pressure." The offer was so simple, so undemanding. For a moment, the old fears surfaced. It's too soon. You're not ready. You can't trust anyone. But looking at David's open, expectant face, those fears felt like relics from a past life. I wasn't the broken woman from 6 months ago. I was someone new. "I'd like that," I said, surprising myself. "I'd like that a lot." His smile was like sunshine. We exchanged numbers and he walked away with a little wave. As I drove home, an unfamiliar feeling bubbled up inside me. It was tentative, fragile, but unmistakable. It was hope. Not the desperate hope of saving a dying marriage, but the quiet, gentle hope of a new connection, a possibility. I wasn't ready to date, but I was ready for coffee with a friend. It was a start. The next morning, I met Simone for brunch at our usual spot. I told her about David. She nearly spit out her mimosa. "David Chen? The conservator? Chloe, he's gorgeous and smart, and he's liked you since forever. This is fantastic." "It's just coffee," I insisted, but I was smiling. "It's a beginning," she corrected, her eyes twinkling, "and you deserve a good one." As we were paying the bills, Simone's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her expression turned grim. "What is it?" I asked. She sighed. "It's Adrian." Indirectly. My paralegal just forwarded me a link. He's started a GoFundMe. A what? A fundraising page for legal debts and to rebuild a life shattered by a contentious divorce. She made a face. He's playing the victim. There's a sob story about losing his job due to false allegations, about being cleaned out by an ex. He's asking for $50,000. A cold laugh escaped me. The audacity, the sheer staggering lack of self-awareness. Is he serious? Deadly. He's posted it on his social media. A few of his old college buddies are already donating, leaving supportive comments about standing by a brother. She shook her head in disgust. It's a pathetic, transparent play for sympathy and cash, and it could work. The old anger flared hot and bright. After everything, the affair, the lies, the pregnancy he hid, the fraud, he was now painting me as the villain who had destroyed him. He was rewriting our history in real time for an audience of suckers. "Can we do anything?" I asked, my voice tight. "We can't stop him from running a fundraiser, but we can control the narrative. We have the final divorce decree, we have the settlement agreement, which is confidential, but we can release a statement, a brief, factual one from my office. The dissolution of the marriage of Chloe Thorne and Adrian Collins was finalized on date. The terms were negotiated and agreed upon by both parties with legal counsel. Any characterizations to the contrary are false." We don't engage with his story, we just state the facts. It takes the wind out of his sails for anyone who might be skeptical. It felt unsatisfying. I wanted to scream the truth from the rooftops. I wanted to post the ultrasound photo, his confession email, the HR letter. But Simone was right. Engaging in a public mudslinging match would only drag me back into his drama. It would give him oxygen. "Do it," I said. The quiet, factual statement. Then I'm blocking him on every platform I forgot about. I'm done. He can wallow in his self-pity and beg for money from strangers. It has nothing to do with me. As I said the words, I felt the truth of them settle in my bones. His pathetic fundraiser wasn't a threat. It was a confirmation. He was stuck in the wreckage, playing the victim because it was the only role he had left.
I had moved on. I had a new home, a thriving career, a potential friend for coffee, and a life that was finally, authentically my own. His circus was no longer in my town. Let him have his sad little parade. I had an exhibition to run and a city full of beauty to explore. The quiet statement from Simone's firm did its work. A few local business blogs picked it up, juxtaposing it with a link to Adrian's fundraising page. The comments on his page shifted subtly. A few people asked uncomfortable questions. If the settlement was agreed upon, why do you need donations for legal debt? His fundraising stalled around $8,000 mark, far short of his goal. The spectacle fizzled, leaving behind a digital stain of embarrassment.
I, true to my word, blocked him on the last remaining social media platform I used. I didn't look at the news. I didn't ask Simone for updates. It was like closing a book I'd already finished reading. The story was over. The protagonist had moved on. My coffee with David turned into a walk through the museum where he worked, where he showed me works in progress in the conservation lab with a passionate, nerdy glee that was incredibly endearing. It turned into dinner at a tiny, authentic Italian place he knew. We talked for hours about art, about travel, about our failed marriages, his with a wistful sadness, mine with a detached clarity that surprised me. He was a gentleman. He didn't try to kiss me at the end of the night, just hugged me and said he'd had a wonderful time. The lack of pressure was a balm. It felt like being seen, not as a conquest or replacement, but as Chloe. A month later, I was in my new condo, hanging the final piece of art for the renewal exhibition, a stunning, abstract painting in shades of cobalt and gold that I'd bought for myself. As I stepped back to admire it, my doorbell rang. It was a delivery man with a large, flat package. I signed for it, puzzled. I wasn't expecting anything. Inside was a beautiful, framed botanical print. Not expensive, but exquisite in its detail. A study of a phoenix palm, rising with resilient grace. The card tucked in the corner was from David. Saw this and thought of you. Rising always. D. Tears pricked my eyes, but they were happy tears. They were tears of being understood. He hadn't sent flowers, a generic romantic gesture. He'd sent a piece of art that spoke to my journey. It was thoughtful in a way Adrian had never been, even at his best. I hung the print in my entryway, the first thing you saw when you came in. It felt right. Life began to take on a new, gentle rhythm. Work, dinners with Simone, occasional outings with David that were slowly, naturally becoming something more than friendship. I started painting again myself, something I hadn't done since college, just for the joy of it. My new condo was filled with light and the quiet sounds of my own contentment. One afternoon, I was at the gallery, brainstorming ideas for the next season's theme with Leo. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. Usually I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me pick up. Chloe Thorne? Ms. Thorne, this is Officer Miller with the 12th Precinct. I'm sorry to bother you. We have an Adrian Collins here. He's been involved in a minor incident, and he's listed you as his emergency contact. We need someone to come pick him up. The world seemed to tilt on its axis for a second. Emergency contact. He hadn't changed it. Or maybe he had no one else to list. What kind of incident? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. A altercation at a bar. He's not being charged. He's just intoxicated and unable to get himself home safely. He's insisting we call you. A tired, profound sadness washed over me, not for him, but for the pathetic spectacle he had become, drunk in a bar fight, calling his ex-wife to bail him out. "I'm sorry, officer," I said, my voice firm. Adrian Collins and I are divorced. I am not responsible for him, and I will not be coming to pick him up. Please remove me from his emergency contacts. You'll have to call someone else, or let him sober up in a cell." There was a pause. On the other end. "Understood, ma'am. Sorry to have troubled you." I hung up. My hands were trembling slightly, not from fear or unresolved feeling, from the sheer, exhausting weight of his continued presence in my life, even as a ghost on a police blotter. Leo was watching me, concerned. "Everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, finally, everything is okay." That night I had plans with David. We were going to see an indie film. As I got ready, I thought about the phone call. It felt like the last faint echo of a storm that had passed. Adrian was no longer my problem. His choices, his consequences, and his sad downward spiral, they belonged to him alone. I looked at myself in the mirror. I was wearing a green dress that brought out the color in my eyes. I looked alive. I looked happy. When David picked me up, he took my hand as we walked to the theater. His hand was warm, solid. It felt like an anchor to a good, steady present. In the dark of the theater, as the previews played, I leaned my head against his shoulder. He rested his cheek against my hair. It was a simple, intimate gesture. It felt easy. It felt right. And in that moment, surrounded by the comfortable darkness and the promise of a story on screen, I realized I was free. Not just legally or financially, but in my soul. The chains of betrayal, anger, and grief had fallen away. The past was a country I had left, its borders closed behind me. Spring arrived in the city with a sudden, lush intensity. Trees burst into bloom overnight, and the air lost its winter bite, carrying instead the scent of damp earth and possibility. My little balcony became a jungle of new plants, and I spent my Sunday mornings there with coffee and a sketchbook, capturing the quick, bright life of the sparrows that visited. David and I had settled into a comfortable, sweet pattern. We weren't living in each other's pockets. We were both adults with full, independent lives, but we spent most weekends together. He taught me how to make proper pasta from scratch. I dragged him to modern dance performances, which he endured with good humor. We talked about everything. Our pasts no longer forbidden territories, but understood landscapes that had shaped who we were now. One Saturday, we were at the farmer's market, filling a tote bag with absurdly expensive heirloom tomatoes and fresh basil. As we debated the merits of different types of goat's cheese, I felt a familiar, unwelcome prickle on the back of my neck, the sensation of being watched. I glanced around casually, and there he was, Adrian. He was standing by a flower stall about 50 feet away, holding a sad-looking bunch of daisies. He was alone. He looked diminished, thinner, his clothes hanging loosely. He was staring right at me, a complex expression on his face, longing, shame, regret. Our eyes met. A jolt went through me, but it wasn't pain. It was just recognition, like seeing a character from a book you'd finished long ago suddenly walking around in the real world.
David, noticing my stillness, followed my gaze. "Is that?" he asked softly, his hand coming to rest reassuringly on the small of my back. "Yes," I said, my voice even. "It is." Adrian seemed to realize he'd been seen. He flinched, looked down at the daisies as if he'd forgotten he was holding them, then turned abruptly and walked away, melting into the crowd. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. David's hand was a warm, steady pressure. "Are you okay?" he asked. I turned to look at him, at his kind, concerned face, and I realized with a surge of pure certainty that I was more than okay. "I'm fine," I said, and I meant it. "Let's get that cheese." We continued our shopping, and the encounter faded like a minor discordant note in a otherwise beautiful piece of music. It held no power over me. Seeing him was like seeing a ghost, startling but ultimately insubstantial. My present was too solid, too vibrant to be haunted. Later that evening, as we cooked dinner in my kitchen, David said, "You know, you amaze me." "Why?" I asked, grating Parmesan. "The strength it must have taken to go through all that and come out the other side like this." He gestured around at the cozy, fragrant kitchen, at me, happy, whole, not bitter. I thought about it, stirring the simmering tomato sauce. I was bitter for a while, and angry, so angry I thought it would burn me up from the inside. But you can't live in the fire. You either get consumed or you use it to forge something new. I guess I chose to forge. He came over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "I'm glad you did." In that moment, I felt a gratitude so profound, it was almost dizzying. Gratitude for my own resilience, for Simone's fierce friendship, for this good, steady man who saw my strength as something beautiful, not threatening. The doorbell rang, breaking the moment. It was a courier with a legal-looking envelope for me. My heart gave a foolish, reflexive lurch, but when I saw the return address, it was from the management company of my new building, just the annual meeting notice. I laughed at myself, shaking my head, the ghost of old fears, still whispering, but growing fainter every day. A few weeks later, I got the news that the renewal exhibition had been shortlisted for a prestigious local arts award. It was a huge honor, a validation of my vision not just as a gallery owner, but as a curator. Simone insisted on throwing me a celebration dinner at her place. It was a small gathering. Simone and her latest boyfriend, a wonderfully boring cardiologist, Leo and his partner, David, and a couple of the artists from the show. The table was loud with laughter and clinking glasses. I looked around at the faces of my friends, my chosen family, and felt a swell of pure, uncomplicated joy. This was my life, not a rebound, not a reaction to Adrian, but a positive creation of my own making. It was built on honesty, hard work, and the love of good people. After dinner, as we were having coffee on Simone's terrace, she pulled me aside. She heard something, she said, her voice low. Through the grapevine. Adrian's being let go from the suburban firm. Downsizing, they said. But the rumor is his heart just isn't in it. He's flailing. I sipped my wine, watching the city lights. The news didn't give me pleasure. It just felt sad and distant. I hope he finds his way, I said, and I realized I meant it. Not for him, but for the principle of it. I didn't wish him well, but I no longer wished him ill. I was just indifferent. Simone smiled, a knowing, proud smile. You've truly moved on. I have, I said, and it was the truest thing I'd said all night. As David and I drove home later, he reached over and took my hand. It was a great night. I'm so proud of you, Chloe. I squeezed his hand. Thank you for being part of it. We drove in comfortable silence. I looked out the window at the passing lights, each one a story, a life. Mine was just one among millions, but it was mine. Scarred, yes. Wiser, definitely. But whole, and finally, blessedly at peace. The past was a closed book on a shelf. The present was a gift I opened anew every day. And the future was a wide open space, full of light and art and love, waiting for me to step into it. The art awards ceremony was held in a grand old library, all dark wood and the smell of aged paper. I wore a simple emerald green dress, one that made me feel confident, not like I was playing a part. David was my date, looking handsome and slightly out of his element in a tuxedo, which only made me adore him more. We didn't win the top prize. A groundbreaking digital installation from a collective in Brooklyn took it. But when they announced the renewal exhibition as a runner-up and called my name to accept the recognition, a surge of pure professional pride washed over me. I walked to the podium, the applause warm in my ears. Looking out at the sea of faces, colleagues, critics, friends, I felt no imposter syndrome. I felt like I belonged. This was my world, and I had earned my place in it on my own terms. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice clear and steady. This exhibition was born from a very personal place, the belief that from endings, however painful, new and beautiful things can grow. My deepest thanks to the artists who trusted me with their stories of renewal and who so powerfully gave that concept form. This is for them. It was a short, graceful speech. As I walked back to our table, David's eyes were shining. He kissed my cheek as I sat down. "You were perfect," he whispered. Later, at the after-party, I was cornered by an older gentleman, a well-known collector. "Miss Turn," he said, his eyes sharp behind his glasses. That exhibition was a revelation. The coherence of vision, the emotional resonance. I'd like to discuss commissioning you to curate a private collection for my foundation. Are you open to freelance work? It was a huge opportunity, one that would give me financial and creative independence beyond the gallery. We exchanged cards and agreed to meet for lunch. As I walked back to David, feeling elated, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a dark window. The woman looking back was a stranger, in the best way, assured, successful, glowing with a happiness that came from within. A few days after the ceremony, I was in my home office, sketching out ideas for the collector's project, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Chloe, it's Ilara. I know I have no right to contact you. I just wanted to say thank you. For not exposing me when you could have. For handling everything with the dignity I didn't deserve. Isla is 3 months old. She's smiling now. I'm going to try to be a good mom. I'm so sorry. For everything. I'll never bother you again." I read the message 3 times. The anger I'd once felt for her was completely gone. In its place was a quiet respect. She was trying. She was facing her mess, raising her child. She was, in her own way, seeking renewal too. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that wouldn't open a door I needed to keep closed. But I didn't block the number either. I just let the message sit there, a final, sad postscript to that chapter. That weekend, David and I took a drive out of the city, to a state park known for its waterfalls. We hiked a winding trail, the air cool and pine-scented. At the lookout point, standing before a crashing curtain of white water, he turned to me. "Chloe," he said, his voice a little rough with emotion. "I know it hasn't been that long, and I know your last chapter was epic in the worst way. I don't want to be a rebound. I don't want to be a reaction." My heart started to pound. "You're not, David. You know you're not." He took my hands in his. "Good. Because what I feel for you isn't a reaction to anything. It's its own thing. It's steady and deep, and it makes me want to build something real with you. No pressure, no timeline, just the intention to see where this goes, together." Tears filled my eyes, but they were tears of joy, of relief. He was offering me a partnership, not a rescue, a future, not an escape. "I want that too," I said, my voice thick. "More than anything." He kissed me then, softly, with the roar of the waterfall as our witness. It felt like a promise, a new beginning, built on a foundation of mutual respect and hard-won peace. On the drive home, my hand in his, I thought about how far I'd come. From the shattered woman on the kitchen floor to the woman hiking with a good man, planning a future. The journey had been brutal, but it had forged me into someone I could finally respect. Someone who was brave, who was resilient, who knew her own worth. That night, back in my condo, I went to the filing cabinet. I took out the manila envelope from Simone. I didn't open it. I carried it to the fireplace. A gas one for show, but it would do. I lit the fire. The blue and orange flames danced behind the glass. I looked at the envelope, the last physical remnant of the pain. Then, without ceremony, I fed it to the fire. The paper caught, curled, blackened, and turned to ash. I watched it until there was nothing left. It was done. Truly, finally, done. I turned off the fire and went to bed, where David was already asleep, one arm thrown across my pillow. I slid in beside him, curling into his warmth. He mumbled something in his sleep and pulled me closer. As I drifted off, the last conscious thought I had was a simple one, filled with a profound and grateful peace. I am home. A year to the day after I saw the message light up Adrian's phone, I stood in my gallery preparing for a very different kind of opening. This one wasn't for the public. It was a small private viewing for friends and a few select clients. The exhibition was called Foundations. It featured my own work. For the past 6 months, in the quiet hours before the gallery opened, or late at night in my sun-drenched studio at home, I had been painting. Not the careful, precise sketches of my youth, but bold, expressive abstract pieces. They were explorations of texture and color, layers of rough gesso, smooth washes of pigment, scratches of charcoal, delicate veins of gold leaf. They were maps of emotion. One, titled Fissure, was all deep cracks and unexpected glowing seams of amber. Another, After the Fire, was a stunning expanse of textured black from which emerged subtle, resilient shoots of sage green and the faintest shimmer of platinum. It was the most vulnerable thing I had ever done, to put my internal landscape on the wall for judgment. But it felt necessary, the final act of reclamation. David was my first viewer. He'd seen the works in progress, offering quiet encouragement, never critique. When he saw them hung under the lights, he'd gotten choked up. "They're you," he said simply. "They're beautiful." Now, as the first guests arrived, Simone, Leo, a few of my most loyal collectors, the artists from the renewal show, I felt nervous excitement, not dread. This was a celebration, not a test. The evening was a warm blur of congratulations and genuine engagement with the work. People saw things in the paintings I hadn't consciously put there,
which was the highest compliment. A collector bought after the fire on the spot. Near the end of the night, as I was talking to an older couple about the use of gold leaf, I saw Simone signal me from across the room. She had a strange look on her face, not alarmed, but significant. I walked over. "What is it?" she said quietly, nodding towards the gallery's entrance. "You have a visitor." Standing just inside the door, looking awkward and out of place, was Adrian. He looked better than he had at the farmer's market, cleaner, dressed in a decent suit, but he still had a haunted, hollow look about him. He held a single white orchid in a simple pot. My first instinct was cold fury. How dare he come here, to this sacred space I'd built, on this night of all nights? But the fury died as quickly as it rose, replaced by a weary curiosity. What could he possibly want? "Do you want me to ask him to leave?" Simone asked, her voice protective. I watched him for a moment. He wasn't approaching. He was just standing there, looking at my paintings on the far wall. His expression was unreadable. "No," I said. "It's okay. I'll handle it." I took a deep breath and walked towards him. He saw me coming and stiffened, his grip tightening on the orchid pot. "Chloe," he said when I was within earshot. His voice was low, rough. I saw the listing for your show. I had to come." "Why?" I asked, my tone neutral, neither welcoming nor hostile. He swallowed, his eyes darting to the paintings behind me, then back to my face. "To see. To, apologize. Properly. Not in an email, not when I was drunk or desperate. Just to say I'm sorry. For everything. For all of it." He held out the orchid. "This is for you. For your new foundation."
I didn't take it. I just looked at him, this man who had been the center of my universe, then its destroyer, and now was just a man in a suit holding a plant. I searched for any residual love, any hatred. There was none. There was just a vast, calm emptiness where he was concerned. "Thank you for the apology," I said, finally. My voice was quiet, firm. "I accept it, but I don't need the orchid, Adrian, and I don't need you in my life anymore, not even for a moment like this." He flinched, but nodded, as if he'd expected nothing less. "The paintings, they're incredible. You always were talented. I'm glad you're doing this, that you're happy." The words seemed to cost him something. "I am," I said. It was a simple, devastating truth. He nodded again, looking down at the orchid in his hands, a rejected peace offering. "Okay, I'll go. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry, and I'm glad you won." With that, he turned and walked out of the gallery, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a moment, watching this space where he'd been. "I'm glad you won." The words echoed. He saw it as a competition with a winner and a loser. I saw it as a survival with a survivor and a casualty. Perhaps we'd always seen things differently. Simone came up beside me, slipping her arm through mine. "You okay?" I looked at her, then back at my paintings, at the friends mingling, at David, who was watching me from across the room with a soft, proud smile. "I'm perfect," I said. And I was. His appearance had been a ghost from a past life, paying a final visit. It hadn't shaken me. It had only solidified how far I'd come. The apology, however belated, had been his to give for his own peace. My peace was already found. It was in this gallery, in my art, in the love of my friends, in the promise of a future with a good man. I walked over to David. He put his arm around me, pulling me close. "Everything all right?" he murmured into my hair. "Everything is exactly as it should be," I replied, leaning into his strength. Later, as we locked up the gallery, I took one last look at my paintings, illuminated by the security lights. They were my story, told in color and texture, a story of breaking and burning and the slow, beautiful, arduous work of building something new from the ashes. It wasn't a happy story, but it was a true one, and it had brought me here, to this moment of profound, hard-won contentment. I turned off the lights, closed the door, and took David's hand. Together, we walked out into the soft, welcoming night, leaving the past safely behind us, locked in the dark, and stepped forward into the bright, open expanse of everything that was yet to come. If this story resonated with you, if it kept you listening until the end, please do me a huge favor. Tap that like button. It lets me know you want more stories like this. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. That way you'll never miss the next story of strength, secrets, and starting over. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were me? And what city are you listening from? I read every single one. Your support is what lets me keep bringing you these powerful, real-life stories. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening. Until next time, stay strong.